Millionaire CEO finds little girl on a frozen road with twins. What he did next left everyone in tears. Before we dive into this emotional story, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? I love seeing how far this story reaches. Drop your country and time in the comments. I read every single one. The storm screamed like a wounded beast across the Connecticut hills, shredding the sky with white claws. Ember Collins pressed her skinny frame against the gale, every snowflake another needle in her exposed skin. River squirmed inside the threadbare blanket, a muffled whimper rising from his tiny lungs. Rosie's fist, no bigger than a robin's egg, punched weakly at Ember's collarbone as she tried to soothe her. The orphanage lights had vanished behind her, swallowed by darkness and distance she dared not measure. But the echo of iron doors slamming still rang inside her skull, each clang shouting that she was nobody's child. Her mother's voice, faint as candle smoke, floated beside her. Whatever happens, never let them go. Ember recited those words like scripture, letting their warmth battle the merciless frost chewing her toes. She imagined Mama's smile, cracked yet fierce, the night pneumonia stole her last breath. The memory split Ember's heart open but poured courage into the cracks. Wind shoved her sideways, knee-deep drifts grabbing at her ankles like icy hands begging she stay. Yet she staggered forward, pitching her weight to protect the babies from the next vicious gust. Snow whipped across the asphalt ahead, erasing the line between road and ditch. Headlights were a myth in this vacuum, but she kept hoping. Behind her, somewhere, men's boots might already be crunching after escaped property. The thought jolted her legs with a burst of panic energy. Each exhale formed a ghost that disappeared before it could comfort her. River coughed, a tiny rattling sound that stabbed Ember with terror sharper than any wind. "Hold on, little brother," she begged, voice raspy, breath steaming around her plea. Rosie's eyelids fluttered, lashes catching snowflakes like silver dust. Ember shifted both infants higher against her chest, arms numb but still locking them close. Paw irradiated from her bare feet, but she imagined the asphalt was warm sand on a summer beach. Thunder growled overhead, though no lightning came, only thicker darkness. The storm covered everything in equal cruelty: wealth, poverty, hope, despair. None mattered to the snow. The orphanage van would search the main roads first, Ember reasoned, steering herself toward the interstate. But her calculations blurred as dizziness spun the horizon. Hunger slithered through her stomach like a cold serpent coiling tighter. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's leftover oatmeal, already gray and lumpy when served. She licked snow from her cracked lips, pretending it tasted like the sugar plums Mama once promised for Christmas. A howl, maybe wind, maybe wolf, echoed over the barren fields flanking the road. Ember's heartbeat drummed in her ears louder than the storm. The twins quieted, sensing her fear as if they shared the same fragile pulse. Suddenly the world tilted. Black spots peppered her vision like ash swirling in stormlight. She forced one more step, then another, boots that weren't there crunching in her imagination. Her knees gave out, plunging her onto unforgiving ice. The jolt nearly made her drop the babies, but adrenaline flared and her arms clamped tighter. She knelt, snow soaking the hem of her nightdress, teeth chattering a hymn of survival. "Please someone see us," she prayed, though she wasn't sure if prayer still worked after Mama died. Beyond the white veil, a distant hum rose, the low growl of an engine slicing through night. Ember lifted her head, strands of frozen hair snapping against her cheeks. The hum swelled into a roar, then two piercing beams punched holes in the blizzard. The SUV's headlights painted the falling snow gold, turning every flake into a tiny ember like her name. Tires screeched as the vehicle fishtailed, fighting for grip on glassy asphalt. For a heartbeat, fear whispered that the van had found her after all. But the sleek silhouette was nothing like the orphanage's rattling minibus. Hot exhaust breathed over her like dragon smoke. As the SUV halted inches away, the rear lights glowed red, a strange promise of life in the color of danger. The driver's door swung open before the engine fully died. A tall figure stepped into the maelstrom, coat whipping like a raven's wing. Ember squinted, vision swimming with tears and snowmelt. His face was pale against the darkness, jaw clenched, eyes wide with shock. "Are you real?" she managed, voice thin as spider silk. Snowflakes melted on her lashes, sliding down to sting her eyes like salt. She feared he might vanish, another cruel mirage. Or are you here to take us away too? She forced herself to ask, testing fate. The stranger dropped to one knee, boots crunching in ice. His expensive coat billowed as he shrugged it off, ignoring the cold to wrap it around the children. Warmth radiated from the wool, smelling of cedar, fireplace, and something rich Ember couldn't name. His hands were steady yet trembling, like a man touching a holy relic. Up close, Ember noticed a faint scar above his brow, the only imperfection on an otherwise perfect mask. Snow gathered on his dark hair, turning him statuesque and surreal. "No one's taking you," he said, voice deep, smooth, but cracked by emotion he couldn't hide. His breath fogged between them, mingling with hers like two spirits meeting in the storm. Ember looked into his eyes and saw not pity, but unspoken recognition, as if he'd met her in dreams. River whimpered again, and the man's expression shattered into raw concern. He reached forward, paused, then placed a gentle hand on the blanket, tentative in his protection. Ember's survival instincts flickered. Strangers had always meant danger. But exhaustion blurred the boundaries of trust and fear. Still, she angled her body to shield the twins, proving she was willing to fight anyone, even him. He admired that defiance, a flicker of respect lighting his gaze. "We need to get you warm," he murmured, scanning the empty highway. The SUV's interior light glowed invitingly, casting soft gold onto untouched leather seats. Ember glanced at the vehicle, imagining heat vents kissing her frozen skin. Her limbs ached for that promise, yet hesitation clamped her throat. Mama always warned, kind smiles can hide sharp knives. "I'm Elijah," he offered, voice quieter, as if names had power to build bridges. Names felt useless to Ember. In the orphanage, she was just girl 17. But she remembered Mama giving her the name Ember because fire survives even under ash. She straightened a little, pain shooting up her shins. "Ember," she introduced, surprising herself with a spark of boldness. Elijah's eyes softened at the name, like hearing a familiar song long forgotten. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, far too large yet somehow perfect, and draped it over her shoulders too. The weight made her feel anchored, less likely to blow away with the storm. A shiver shook her, and she bit her lip to keep teeth from rattling a confession of weakness. "Can you stand?" he asked, extending a leather-gloved hand. Ember tried to rise, her legs buckled, agony shooting through frost-bitten toes. Elijah caught her and the babies in one swift motion, strength surprising after his refined appearance. Ember gasped as her world tilted, leaving her briefly weightless. Cradled against his chest, she felt his heartbeat, steady, powerful, reassuring. The scent of cologne and fresh snow swirled around them, both alien and comforting. He carried all three children to the open back seat, gentle as if handling crystal. Warm air burst from the vents, washing over Ember like summer sun. River stirred, releasing a tiny sigh that cracked Ember's composure. Tears spilled before she could stop them. She brushed them away quickly, ashamed of weakness in front of a stranger. Elijah strapped the seatbelt across them, ensuring the buckle clicked safely. Snow pelted the windshield, but inside the cabin a cocoon of calm began to bloom. Ember's toes prickled painfully as feeling tried to return. She watched Elijah stride around to the driver's side, silhouette cutting through swirling white. The door slammed, sealing them away from the howl. Dashboard lights illuminated his thoughtful profile as he started the engine. He glanced back, voice soft enough to soothe but firm enough to anchor. "You are safe, Ember, I promise." Promises were currency she'd never trusted, yet something about his tone minted hope. Outside, the storm raged, but Ember felt the first flicker of warmth in more ways than one. She smoothed a blanket corner over Rosie's rosy cheek, marveling that the baby still slept. River's tiny fingers curled around a lock of Ember's hair, tethering them together like a vow. Tires gripped the icy road, the SUV pulling away, leaving the spot where despair nearly won. Ember dared a final look through the rear window. The snow quickly erased their footprints, hiding her escape. For the first time since Mama's last breath, Ember allowed herself to exhale fully. She listened to the quiet hum of the heater, a lullaby of machinery she never knew could sound gentle. Elijah adjusted the rear-view mirror, meeting Ember's eyes, asking questions without words, offering comfort without touch. She swallowed, voice barely audible. "Thank you. I think you saved us." He shook his head slightly, eyes shining. "Maybe you saved me." Ember didn't understand, but the sincerity in his gaze felt like sunlight inside her chest. She rested her head back, eyelids heavy, muscles loosening one frightened fiber at a time. The vehicle cut through the snow like a ship through waves, forging a path to a destination unseen. Elijah's mind raced with memories of a childhood lullaby, of dreams where a girl's tears froze to diamonds. He glanced again at the children. The vision matched the dream so precisely his heart thundered. Ember slipped into half-consciousness, clutching the two winds, feeling the seat vibrate like a purring giant. Beyond the glass, dawn tried to etch a faint gray on the horizon, promising that even the longest night ends. And in that fragile dawn light, 3 abandoned children and a lonely billionaire began rewriting the fate the storm tried to seal. The elevator doors parted with a soft chime, revealing the marble-clad interior of Elijah Vance's 80th floor penthouse, a place built with everything money could buy and yet empty of the very thing Ember brought in with her, truth. The city lights glittered like shattered stars beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows, but neither Elijah nor the child noticed. She clung to her siblings while paramedics gently peeled off frozen socks, revealing toes blistered with cold burns and skin flushed red with damage. Ember didn't flinch, her pain tolerance had been taught by loss and survival, not choice. Elijah knelt beside her, unable to stop watching the way her tiny jaw clenched with silent bravery. Beside her, River whimpered in his sleep, and Rosie clung to Ember's arm, like she knew that if she let go, the world might disappear again. A medic glanced at Elijah for permission to continue, but Elijah simply nodded, the lump in his throat making words too heavy to lift. The room was warm, almost stifling, but he still felt frozen inside, as if the storm had moved into his bones. Ember's eyes scanned the penthouse, gold-framed paintings, a white piano, polished stone that glowed under recessed lights, yet nothing made her relax. She gripped the edge of the couch like it might float her away if the walls turned cruel. "It's beautiful," she murmured, voice flat, but so was the orphanage, before the yelling started. Elijah's chest tightened. He looked at her and saw not a homeless child, but something terrifyingly familiar, a mirror to his own forgotten cries. She turned to him, her voice barely Abby. Of a breath, "Is this a safe place? Or a golden prison?" The question gutted him. He paused, heart thudding with a past he never invited into the present. "It's a promise," he answered softly, sitting beside her. "No cages here, not for you, not ever again." Ember looked away, eyes distant, like she wanted to believe him, but had too many reasons not to. The medic wrapped her toes gently, then quietly retreated, sensing a moment bigger than first aid. Rosie fussed, and Elijah handed Ember a warmed bottle one of the assistants had rushed to prepare, an act so ordinary, but in this penthouse, it felt revolutionary. The child's small fingers brushed his as she took it, and in that moment, Elijah noticed something beneath the edge of her sleeve. A faint curved mark on her wrist, a crescent moon birthmark, barely visible, but unforgettable. His breath hitched, memories slamming into his mind like freight. That symbol, he'd seen it before, not just in dreams, but in the fragmented memories of a boy who woke crying in foster homes, whispering about a sister he couldn't name and a lullaby he couldn't place. His eyes locked on the mark like it was a missing puzzle piece that had always been just out of reach. Ember noticed his stare and pulled her sleeve down instinctively, heart pounding. "It's just a birthmark," she mumbled, but Elijah shook his head slowly, almost afraid to speak. "No," he whispered, "it's more." He stood and walked to the window, trying to breathe against the sudden weight in his lungs. The skyline stretched endlessly, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful looking at it, he felt small. Ember watched him with quiet caution, unsure whether she should trust the man who stared at her like a ghost. "Why do you look like you've seen a monster?" she asked. Elijah turned, blinking back something he didn't want her to see. "Because maybe I have. Maybe it's the one inside me." She didn't respond, but her gaze softened, as if she recognized the way shame settled in his voice. Rosie cooed gently in her arms, and Elijah felt the ache of never having someone to hold like that. My mom had the same mark, Ember said suddenly, eyes on the fireplace she didn't dare approach. She said it came from her brother, but she never talked about him much, said he was stolen. Elijah's heart skipped. Stolen. That word shattered him. He turned back toward her slowly, every breath now laced with disbelief. Did she ever say his name? He asked, voice cracking like glass underfoot. Ember shook her head. No, but she used to sing a song when we were scared. She'd hum it like it was hers, but I think it belonged to someone else first. She began to hum softly, just a few notes, delicate, familiar, haunting. Elijah felt his knees weaken. That melody had lived in his nightmares for decades. The same tune that made him cry at night when he was just a foster kid, dreaming of someone who was missing. His fists clenched, not in anger, but in desperation to hold on to the thread unraveling in front of him. Do you believe in fate? He asked quietly, unsure if he even did. Ember tilted her head. I believe Mama used to say nothing happens without a reason, even the bad stuff. Elijah exhaled, the sound shaky. He walked back to her and knelt again, his expensive suit wrinkling against the hard wood. I think I met your mother a long time ago, he said. Maybe I forgot who I was, until tonight. Ember looked at him, confusion and hope warring in her expression. You know her? She asked, gripping the bottle tighter. Elijah didn't answer immediately, his mind reeled with flashbacks, a fire, a woman screaming, a child being pulled away. Could it be real? Could he be remembering something that wasn't a dream at all? I don't know, he admitted finally, but I think I'm supposed to. Silence stretched between them. Then Ember did something unexpected. She reached out her hand, not to shake, not to test, just to connect. Her fingers touched his again, smaller than his by miles, but somehow stronger. I don't know who you are, she said. But River and Rosie. They haven't cried once since you picked us up. Elijah's throat tightened. The heaviness inside his chest shifted, not gone, but moving. That has to mean something, she added. He nodded. Yeah, it means, maybe this place was waiting for you. Ember leaned back, cradling the babies as if guarding them from the world but just starting, to let a crack of light in. Elijah stood again, walked over to the sleek black piano in the corner and lifted the lid. The keys gleamed like ivory promises. He pressed one gently. A note echoed across the marble room, and Ember's eyes widened. That's the same key, she whispered. Same as Mama's lullaby. Elijah looked up at the ceiling, then back down at the keys. Then maybe, I remember more than I thought. Outside the wind still raged, but inside the penthouse, a warmth had begun to bloom, not from the heat, but from a single, impossible, undeniable truth. The past was no longer hiding. Elijah's heartbeat throbbed in his ears like war drums as he turned from the flickering surveillance screen. The sight of Maddox Kane's grainy silhouette, lurking with the calm of a serpent, shattered the illusion of safety in his penthouse fortress. That man wasn't a coincidence. He was a shadow from a nightmare now clawing into reality. Harper's voice was low but urgent, barely containing the tremble. We've locked the elevator access and deployed men to every floor, but if he's here... She didn't finish. Elijah's gaze cut to the bedroom door where Ember lay curled like a wounded fawn between her infant siblings, her body wrapped protectively around them like armor forged in fear. No marble floor or gilded chandelier could defend against the predator stalking them. He paced toward the nursery-turned-guest room but hesitated at the threshold. Inside, Ember stirred as if she sensed danger in her dreams. Her lips moved in sleep. Mama, I'm keeping them safe, just like you said. Elijah's throat closed. How long had this little girl carried a mother's burden with no rest? How many nights had she been both child and guardian? He turned to Harper. I want full lockdown. This isn't a penthouse anymore. It's a fortress. Harper nodded, already tapping her earpiece, issuing orders with military precision. But just then, Ember's eyes snapped open. She clutched River and Rosie tighter and sat up, her voice hoarse but sharp. Who was outside? Elijah froze. The instincts of a child betrayed by the world, sharp as daggers. You're hiding something. He crouched down, keeping his voice even. I need you to trust me, Ember. Someone dangerous was nearby, but I swear, no one's going to hurt you. Her chin trembled, but her eyes didn't blink. People always say that. Then they leave. or worse. She scooted back until her spine met the wall, creating a shield of her tiny frame between the twins and the world. Elijah raised both palms. I won't come closer, just let me protect you. You want to help? Don't lock doors, don't touch us, don't lie. Her voice cracked on the last word like breaking glass. Elijah took a slow breath, steadying the weight in his chest. Then let me stand beside you, not above you. For a beat, the storm between them paused. Then Ember looked down at Rosie's hand and whispered, they've been through enough. Down the hallway, Harper approached, concern etched deep into her brow. Sir, Kane slipped away before our team reached the lobby, but security confirmed he entered the building under a stolen ID. He knew what he was doing. Elijah's jaw tightened. Kane's presence wasn't an accident, it was a message. Ember's appearance hadn't gone unnoticed. Harper added, Interpol flagged him 6 months ago, 3 missing children, no survivors. Elijah stared past her, back toward the room where Ember sat like a warrior with no armor left. Then we're not dealing with coincidence. We're in a countdown. Harper hesitated, then lowered her voice. Sir, is it possible they weren't lost children? Could they be taken? Elijah's eyes clouded with something darker than fear, guilt. No, I saw the pain in her eyes. That was grief, not deception. As night bled into early morning, Ember refused food unless the twins ate first. Elijah noticed the way she counted each bite, rationing like she'd done it 1,000 times. Even the softest blankets made her flinch. Every knock made her jolt. She didn't trust comfort. It had never been more than bait before. Elijah brought in soft toys, warm pajamas, lullabies playing from hidden speakers, but none reached her. Only when River giggled did Ember let her guard down for a heartbeat. He laughed, she said, eyes wide. He hasn't laughed since the fire. Elijah paused mid-step. The fire? Ember clammed up instantly. I shouldn't have said that. He didn't press. He knew trust was a seed you nurtured, not forced. Later, as the city lights dimmed and the penthouse fell into an eerie silence, Elijah stared out over Manhattan, heart thudding with a realization he hadn't dared voice. The birthmark. The nightmares. The lullaby echoing in his head since he was a boy. Was this fate? Or something far more terrifying? Was Ember connected to his past? Harper returned with a new report. Kane was last seen on a rooftop across from your building. He had binoculars. He's watching us, sir. Elijah clenched his fists. He's not just watching, he's hunting. At that moment, a scream shattered the quiet. Elijah bolted back to the guest room. Ember stood on the bed, holding a lamp in shaking hands, eyes wild. He's here. I saw him, at the window. Elijah rushed to her, but she backed up, lamp raised like a weapon. Don't, I won't let you take them. It took him a full minute of whispered reassurance before she lowered the lamp, her arms trembling. He smiled at me, she whispered, like he knew me. Elijah's skin crawled. It's okay now, you're safe, I swear on everything I have. But even as he said it, he knew safety wasn't a promise, it was a battle, and the war had just begun. Elijah stood frozen at the edge of the hotel suite, the weight of Harper's discovery pressing like a vice on his chest as the crackling warmth of the fireplace flickered against the shadows playing on the walls. Ember sat cross-legged on the velvet couch, the twins nestled against her like fragile petals clinging to the last warmth of spring, her eyes wide with trust yet bruised with experience, holding a chipped mug of cocoa that trembled in her little hands. Elijah knelt beside her, masking his shaking fingers by wrapping them around a porcelain cup, but the moment she softly uttered her mother's name, Eli Collins, his entire soul jolted like a thread pulled taut through time. Ember spoke gently, her voice laced with the ache of a child forced to carry memories far too heavy for her years, recalling bedtime stories Isla used to whisper, of magical forests, fierce love, and a brother she'd once lost to the wind. She said her mother's lullaby was, "You Are My Sunshine," a tune she still hummed to Rosie when the baby cried in her sleep, and the second Elijah heard those words leave Ember's lips, the mug slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor, cocoa pooling like spilled memories at his knees. Ember flinched at the sound, gripping her siblings tighter, but Elijah's eyes had gone somewhere far, into fragments of his childhood he hadn't touched in decades, flashes of a woman's humming, her gentle hands, and that same lullaby lulling him through tear-stained dreams. She said blood doesn't make a family, love does, Ember added, her voice barely a whisper, then reached into her coat and pulled out a small silver locket with a cracked glass front and the tiniest faded photograph inside. A woman with soft eyes, holding a baby boy swaddled in blue. Elijah's throat closed as he stared at the photo, the breath stolen from his lungs as if some long-forgotten corner of his heart was waking up for the first time in years. Then maybe love brought us here for a reason, he whispered hoarsely, brushing Ember's hair from her eyes as if trying to connect past and present in a single touch. Harper appeared quietly in the doorway, her expression pale and tight with urgency, holding a tablet with the screen still glowing, and Elijah rose slowly, nodding for her to speak. "She's alive," Harper murmured, eyes flickering between them. "Eli Collins, she's not dead, Elijah." Ember's head whipped around, her breath catching with a choked gasp, her entire frame trembling. "She's alive?" Her fingers clutched the locket as if afraid it might disappear. Harper nodded grimly, stepping closer. "And Maddox Kane, he's not just watching us, he's her ex-husband. Violent record, he vanished 3 months ago from a child services investigation, and now he's here." Elijah's jaw clenched, the echoes of every unanswered question in his past suddenly thundering with meaning. "Then he's not after the children, he's after Isla," he muttered. "Or maybe both." Ember pulled the twins even closer, her voice quivering. "If she's alive, why didn't she come back for us?" The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Elijah turned, voice firm but gentler than snow. "Sometimes the world hides good people in very dark places." Ember didn't speak, but her eyes held a question too big for any child to carry alone. "What if he finds her first?" Harper's eyes darkened. "He's closing in, Elijah. Cameras caught him 3 floors down, and he's moving like a man with purpose." Elijah nodded once, then faced Ember, dropping to his knees again. "We're going to find her, and we're going to keep you safe, I promise, on everything I have." Ember studied him in silence, searching his face like it was the map she'd been lost without. "Why do you care so much?" Elijah hesitated. "Because I think I knew her, once. And because your lullaby, it was mine too." The room thickened with silence, only the TBWs, in soft breathing filling the air, until Ember whispered, "Then maybe you're the brother she lost." Elijah felt something shift deep within, something ancient and aching, as if the universe had cracked open to let a forgotten truth breathe again. Harper's voice interrupted the moment. "Sir, I need your decision. Should we move them, reinforce security, bring in private protection?" Elijah stood, a fire awakening in his bones. "Do all of it. Lock the elevators, full lockdown, and get me every file you can on Eli Collins, Maddox Kane, and the day I was placed in foster care." Harper blinked. "You think?" Elijah's voice was sharp but haunted. "I don't think anymore. I remember." Ember looked up at him again, and for the first time, her face didn't just show fear, it showed hope, flickering like a candle finally protected from the wind. Elijah looked down at her cracked locket once more and whispered, "We're going to bring her home." Behind them, the fire cracked and hissed, casting long shadows against the marble floor, shadows that had followed them both their entire lives, until now. The light of Elijah's penthouse dimmed under the weight of what Harper uncovered. Maddox Kane, once a man sworn to protect, now exposed as a predator masked by the law, a former detective who had long abandoned duty for the dark currency of corruption. The files Harper decrypted read like a nightmare: forged case notes, sealed court documents, false leads, and a string of vanished children whose names had become ghosts in city databases. The orphanage that claimed Ember and the twins had no next of kin? Bought silence. The social worker who signed their file? Missing. Each paper trail led back to Maddox's stained hands. Elijah's jaw clenched with a fury he hadn't felt since the day he lost his mother, the day a system failed a child, just like now. Harper's voice trembled as she laid it bare. The orphanage didn't just neglect them, they sold them. To cover his debts. Ember was never a ward of the state, she was a product on a shelf. Ember, listening from the corner with arms wrapped around the twins, looked up with hollow eyes, her innocence further fractured. Elijah walked to her, knelt not as a CEO, not as a stranger, but as a man shattered by truth and determined to rise in its wake. "Whatever it takes," he whispered, voice tight with emotion, "I'll protect you. not as a favor, as a promise. She didn't speak, but her hand reached for his, fingers trembling, clutching him like a lifeline. Harper's phone pinged, she checked it and froze, then looked up slowly. "He's here," she said, voice flat with fear. "Maddox is in Manhattan, 10 blocks away." Elijah straightened like a storm forming at sea. "How does he know where they are?" Harper responded, "He hacked hotel records, he's watching camera feeds, sir, he's using old precinct access codes, and he's armed." Elijah paced, fury building like thunder. "Lock down every entrance, secure the kids, call in private security, no one moves without clearance." But Ember stood, fierce and small. "He won't stop, he'll follow us forever. You don't know him like I do." Elijah looked at her and replied, "Then it's time he knows who I am." Harper, fingers dancing across her tablet, activated biometric locks and AI surveillance. Meanwhile, Elijah made a personal call to an old friend in federal justice, someone who owed him more than favors. "He's not leaving this city with breath in his lungs," he said coldly. Outside, lightning cracked above skyscrapers as the city seemed to mirror their storm. Ember whispered something to her sister, "Hold my hand, no matter what," then looked back at Elijah. "What if he finds us first?" Elijah took off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Then he'll have to go through me." Just then, the elevator dinged. Harper reached for her taser. Elijah shielded the children, heart pounding, eyes locked on the metal doors as they slowly creaked open. But it wasn't Maddox, it was 2 of Elijah's elite guards, already briefed, already battle-ready. "We're covering the perimeter, sir, street to sky." Elijah nodded, then whispered to himself, "This ends tonight." He turned to Ember once more. "No more running, no more hiding, not for you, not for them." She stared into his eyes, this strange man who wasn't her father, but looked more like family than anyone else ever had, and she nodded slowly. "Then let's end it." And behind her cracked courage, Elijah saw something that made his chest tighten, not fear, but hope, rising like a fragile bloom after winter's frost. The phone dropped from Harper's trembling hands as the security feed flickered, then went black. Glass exploded like thunder, raining down like icy needles as masked figures burst into the penthouse. Ember screamed, instantly shielding the twins with her tiny frame, eyes wide with terror. Elijah didn't hesitate. He swept them all into his arms, his wounded shoulder grinding with pain. "Basement stairwell, now!" he shouted to Harper, who already had her gun drawn. The marble floors shook beneath their feet as smoke grenades hissed through the vents. Flames of fear licked up Ember's spine as she clutched Rosie, heart hammering like a trapped bird. "Don't look back," Elijah growled, voice raw with desperation, but Ember did, and her breath hitched. There at the hallway's end stood Maddox, no mask, just his twisted grin. "Back so soon, little rabbit?" he purred, taking a slow step forward. Her knees buckled. "I swear I'll jump if he touches us," she cried, pressing Rosie against her chest. Luna whimpered, eyes squeezing shut as gunfire rang out in the hall. Elijah pushed them through the stairwell door just as bullets tore into the wall behind him. Harper stayed behind, firing back with deadly precision, buying them seconds they couldn't afford to lose. Down flight after flight, Elijah bled and burned with every step, shielding the girls with his own body. The emergency exit burst open to a cold, howling blizzard that greeted them like a slap. His SUV waited, engine already roaring. Harper had remote started it moments before the breach. He shoved open the back door, throwing himself into the driver's seat as Ember and the girls piled in. "Go, drive!" Ember screamed, voice cracking with panic. Tires screeched, carving black arcs in the snow as the SUV tore out of the loading dock. Behind them, shadows poured from the alley, chasing like wolves. Luna cried out as a bullet shattered the back window, glass slicing across her cheek. Elijah swerved, ignoring the burning in his shoulder, blood soaking through his tailored shirt. A black van closed in behind them, its engine growling like a predator. "I won't let him take you," Elijah whispered, gripping the wheel until his knuckles blanched. Rosie sobbed into Ember's chest. "I want Mommy. I want her now." Ember's voice broke. "She's gone, Rosie. She's gone because of him." Maddox's van bumped their rear bumper hard, Nia, Raleigh spinning them off course. The bridge came into view, long, frozen, desolate. "Hold on!" Elijah roared, steering onto the ice-laced road with reckless determination. Tires skated on the slick surface as the SUV fishtailed, scraping the guardrail. Another shot rang out, shattering the driver's side mirror. Ember covered Rosie's ears as Luna screamed beside them. The wind roared through the broken glass like a monster howling in grief. Maddox's van accelerated, ramming them again, harder this time. Elijah grunted, vision blurring as pain sliced deeper into his shoulder. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not with 3 tiny lives depending on him. He yanked the wheel hard, sending the SUV into a sideways skid. Snow exploded around them as the vehicle crashed into a frozen snowbank. The impact slammed everyone forward, airbags detonating like thunder. For a breathless moment, silence. Then Ember coughed, blinking through the powdery haze. "Elijah?" she whimpered. He groaned, blood running from his temple now too. "I'm okay. Are they?" "They're okay," she cried, hugging the twins tighter than ever before. The back door wrenched open. For one horrifying second, Ember thought it was Maddox, but it was Harper, bruised, limping, but alive. She tossed a duffel bag inside, breathless. "We need to go, now." Elijah tried to drive but collapsed against the wheel. "You're bleeding too much," Ember shouted. "I'm fine," he slurred. "You're not," she cried. Harper climbed into the driver's seat, hand already on the stick. "We've got a safe house north of here. 5 miles, I'll get us there." Elijah nodded weakly, barely conscious. Behind them, Maddox's van stopped in the middle of the bridge. He stepped out slowly, like a hunter savoring the chase. "He's coming," Ember screamed. "Buckle in," Harper yelled, slamming the SUV into gear. The engine groaned, tires spinning for traction beffaillé, or catching grip. They launched forward, careening off the bridge and down a side road. Snow swallowed them, hiding their trail in icy silence. Ember glanced out the back window. Maddox was shrinking into the storm. But she knew he wasn't giving up. Not now, not ever. Beside her, Luna pressed her cheek to Ember's arm. "I'm scared." "I know, baby. Me too," Ember whispered, tears falling freely. Harper reached into the glove box, pulling out gauze. "Elijah's going to need stitches, maybe surgery." Ember looked at his face, so pale, yet so fierce even in unconsciousness. "He saved us," she whispered. "He nearly died for you," Harper said quietly. Ember wiped her cheeks with trembling hands. "I'm not letting that be for nothing." The safe house appeared at last, a wooden cabin tucked in the trees, its chimney puffing smoke. Harper slammed the brakes and jumped out, unlocking the door with shaking hands. Inside, warmth embraced them, but it couldn't chase away the fear. Elijah was dragged in, unconscious but breathing. Ember set Rosie and Luna near the fire, wrapping them in thick blankets. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet, heavy, relentless. And in the silence, Ember made a promise. "I don't care if he's a monster or the whole world's against us. I will protect them, with or without you, Maddox." Harper stood beside her, gun in hand, eyes locked on the shadows beyond the trees. The storm had passed, but the real battle was just beginning. The SUV, dented and blood-smeared, wheezed as it climbed the icy slope, tires groaning under the weight of desperation. Elijah gritted his teeth through the searing pain in his shoulder, driving on instinct until the road narrowed into a snow-laced trail swallowed by evergreens, and at last, hidden beneath a tangle of vines and forgotten winters, stood a weather-worn cabin, silent, waiting, untouched by time. Harper had guided them remotely through GPS, unlocking the coordinates of a place registered decades ago under the name E. Lockhart, Elijah's birth surname, one he hadn't spoken since foster care swallowed his past. As the door creaked open, Ember and the twins huddled close behind him, Rosie's mitten tugging his coat, Daisy's wide eyes scanning the shadows, while Ember clutched their hands with a fierceness that only a child forced to grow too fast could carry. The scent of pine wood and ash filled the space. A dormant fireplace, dusty furniture, and a single photograph on the mantel, faded but frozen in time, of a woman with sky-blue eyes that mirrored Elijah's. He didn't speak, couldn't. His legs gave way just enough for Harper to catch him before he collapsed completely, whispering, "We're safe, for now." Ember stood frozen until the fire was lit, the twins wrapped in old woolen blankets, their faces softening for the first time in days. And then, finally, Ember broke. She crumpled near the hearth, knees to her chest, fingers digging into her own sleeves as her voice cracked like the wood popping in the fire. She told me to run, she choked. She kissed us, pushed us through the back door. She said, "Go before he finds you." And I wanted to look back, I did, but she screamed, "Don't," like it would kill her if I did. Elijah dropped to his knees beside her, ignoring the burn in his shoulder, his eyes red, not from the cold, but from something deeper, older. He wrapped his good arm around her, letting her sob against his chest while the twins dozed beside them. "You never have to run again," he whispered, voice breaking like thin glass. "I'll be your wall now, I swear it." Outside, wind howled like ghosts with unfinished stories, and inside, the silence that followed Ember's tears was thick, sacred, aching. Then, without realizing, Ember began to hum, softly, a melody no one had taught her, but one that had lived inside her. Elijah's breath caught. His gaze snapped to her lips, then to the fire, then back to his past. He knew that song, just the tune, but every word, every pause, every ache it carried. His mother, his real mother, used to sing it when the world felt like too much, when little Eli couldn't sleep after foster visits, or bruises he couldn't explain. And now here it was again, rising from Ember's chest as though carried by blood. Tentatively, his voice joined hers, cracked and unsure at first, but perfectly in sync, like two puzzle pieces that had finally remembered where they belonged. Ember's eyes met his, wide with disbelief, as their voices floated above the flames in haunted harmony. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The words trembled out of them like they were meant to be shared. "You make me happy, when skies are gray." Tears spilled down Elijah's cheeks, not from pain this time, but from something long buried clawing its way to the surface. A memory of a woman rocking him, whispering, "You're my sunshine, Eli, even when the world forgets." His hand reached for his pocket instinctively, pulling out the locket Ember had shown him earlier, its hinge broken but its soul intact. He opened it again, slowly, staring at the photo inside, a woman's face barely visible through cracks, but those eyes, those same eyes from the mantel. Ember touched the edge of it gently. "She said love makes a family, not blood," she whispered. "But, what if we have both?" Elijah couldn't speak, his throat too tight, heart thudding with a truth he hadn't dared to hope for. Harper, watching from the corner with a trembling breath, turned her tablet slowly, revealing Isla's name and records. "Sir. Ember's mother. Eli Collins. She once went by Isla Lockhart, before she disappeared." The air left Elijah's lungs. "Lockhart," he mouthed. "My mother's name." The pieces clicked like thunder behind his ribs. Ember's mother was his sister. The twins, his nieces. The girl he just promised to protect was already blood. Ember blinked, confused by his stillness. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Elijah smiled through tears and whispered, "Because I think I just found the only family I ever had. And didn't know. Oh, I lost." Ember leaned into him without fully understanding why, but it felt right. Safe, like home. And as the fire crackled behind them, Rosie mumbled in her sleep, "Sing it again, Em." And Ember did, this time, not as a shield, but as a bridge between past and future. Outside, snow began to fall, quiet and thick, erasing every footprint that had brought them there, but inside, the melody carried on. A lullaby. A legacy. A secret now shared. The flicker of firelight danced across Ember's face as her humming softened, her voice trailing into the silent ache of the cabin's shadows. Then came the unmistakable sound of Harper's boots pacing the wood floor, phone still glowing in her hand, eyes wide with disbelief, lips parted as though the truth she held burned behind them. She approached slowly, each step heavy with the weight of 1,000 buried names, and when she finally spoke, it wasn't with her usual certainty, but with a softness, a reverence, like she knew her words would rewrite their very bloodlines. "Eli, your name was never Elijah," she said gently, her voice trembling as she offered him the tablet. "You were born Eli Collins, to Isla's younger sister Amelia, who disappeared right after giving birth. Isla raised you as her own. You two weren't strangers, you were siblings all along." Ember gasped, her hand tightening around his sleeve, while Elijah just stood there, like a statue cracked by a lightning bolt, eyes unblinking, jaw slack, the sound of Ember's humming still echoing in his mind as it collided violently with Harper's truth, and for a moment the room spun, the air grew thicker and the fire seemed to dim under the weight of revelation. "No," he whispered, though it wasn't denial, it was disbelief, the kind that shatters identities and pierces the heart with questions no one is prepared to ask. His knees buckled and he caught himself against the arm of the worn leather chair, as Harper gently lowered beside him, placing the tablet on the table, the family tree glowing faintly, mocking decades of separation. His voice broke like ice beneath. "Feed in spring? She was my mom?" Harper nodded slowly, tears in her own eyes now, for this wasn't just a case file anymore. This was family unraveling at the seams, generations of loss and silence now screaming in a small wooden room lit by fire and pain. Ember crawled to his side, her tiny arms wrapping around his, eyes glistening with innocence and awe. "That means, you're my uncle?" And that word, uncle, echoed through Elijah's chest like thunder through a canyon, like an anchor thrown into deep water, dragging him down into memories that suddenly made sense. Isla's lullaby, the warmth in her eyes the night she died. The whispered stories Ember repeated, and those flashes in his sleep he once thought were trauma but were, in truth, pieces of a boy named Eli trying to remember where he came from. And now, like 1,000 constellations aligning at once, it all came together, not as a punishment, but a purpose, not as a loss, but a second chance. "She didn't abandon me," he murmured, eyes red, chest heaving. "She protected me. She gave me to someone she trusted, to Isla. She gave me love, not lies." And Harper's voice was a fragile whisper. "You were always family, you just forgot. But blood doesn't lie, Eli, and love never gave up on you." Ember clung to him then, sobbing into his coat, not out of fear but release, because the man who'd saved them wasn't a stranger anymore. He was hers, truly and deeply, and for the first time since Isla screamed at her to run, Ember felt like she'd come home. Elijah held her tighter, pressing his forehead to hers, his heart pounding, trembling hands brushing her cheek as he whispered, "I don't care what my name used to be, I'm yours now, I'm not letting anything hurt you, not ever again." But as the truth wrapped around them like a fragile quilt stitched with both joy and sorrow, the light outside shifted, suddenly too bright for the hour, and Harper turned toward the window just as the sound of tires crunching over snow pierced the stillness. Headlights flashed through the trees like specters of dread, bouncing off the icy windowpane, and Elijah's muscles tensed, the warmth of reunion abruptly pierced by the cold blade of reality. Ember's breath caught, and Harper's voice was barely a rasp. "It's him!" Elijah moved fast. He didn't scream or panic, but his body reacted like a soldier hearing the war drums again. He scooped up Rosie, motioned for Ember to grab Lucy, and Harper pulled the old revolver from the drawer Isla once kept hidden behind a false panel in the cabin wall. "He found us," Harper said, her knuckles white around the grip. "We don't have much time." The wind howled louder outside as if the forest itself knew danger was closing in, and Elijah could feel the blood seeping through the bandage on his shoulder again, but he didn't flinch. Ember looked up at him with eyes full of fear, and he leaned down, touching her forehead gently. "Hey," he said, voice low but fierce, "you're not running anymore, we're not hiding." He took enough from this family. Harper slid the bolt on the door. "You ready for this, Eli?" she asked, and for the first time, he nodded, not as Elijah the runaway, but as Eli Collins, the man who remembered, who returned, who stood in the face of the monster that haunted them. Outside, the headlights went dark, and the only sound was the distant crunch of boots on snow. The storm had finally come. Headlights cut through the falling snow like twin blades, slicing into the fragile peace that had barely begun to form around the cabin. Ember gasped as the beams spread across the frosted windows, illuminating Elijah's stunned face, the weight of the revelation still cracking in his chest like breaking ice. But there was no time to process truth, not when evil had arrived, wrapped in gasoline and vengeance. A crash echoed through the trees. The front porch shattered as Maddox kicked the door open, torch in hand, the twisted silhouette of hatred outlined in firelight. He didn't yell, he grinned. It was the kind of grin nightmares wear. Within seconds, the scent of smoke thickened the air, curling into their lungs, burning innocence with every breath. Flames danced across the wooden beams above, greedy and alive. Ember clutched Rosie and Lily, her arms trembling as ash began to fall like black snow. Elijah didn't flinch. He turned, swift and urgent, pulling open a section of floorboards near the fireplace. A secret tunnel, old and narrow, lined in rusted metal and damp soil, the last relic of a man Elijah had never met but now owed everything to. He shoved the girls in, Ember screaming as she looked back. "Don't leave us, please," she cried, fingers reaching. Elijah grabbed her face with fierce tenderness. "This is how I fight, by keeping you safe." He kissed her forehead, then sealed the hatch, vanishing into smoke. Upstairs, Maddox roared like a demon unchained, torch raised high. "Come out, Eli," he mocked, the old name like poison on his tongue. "Come face your price tag." Elijah stepped from the hallway, eyes blazing not just with fury, but purpose. "You want me?" he growled, voice shaking the very walls. "Then let's end what you started." Maddox lunged, torch slamming into the wall as flames surged higher. Elijah dodged, tackling the monster backward through the broken doorframe. They crashed into snow, the heat behind them chasing steam into the cold air. Ember listened through the tunnel grate, sobbing quietly, her body curled over the twins as glowing smoke crept around the edges of the hatch. "Families fight," she whispered, gripping the tiny hands in hers. "So fight, Elijah. Fight like family does." Outside, fists collided with bone and ice. Elijah slammed Maddox's head into the snow, blood splattering across the pristine white like shattered trust. But Maddox was a beast, old and cornered. He bit, clawed, laughed, even, as Elijah drove punch after punch into his jaw. "You stole my sister's hope," Elijah seethed. "You buried my mother's name. You turned me into a lie, but this ends now." Maddox spat blood and snow. "You think they care?" he rasped, eyes wild. "They bought me, and they bought you. You were just a prettier package." That hesitation almost broke Elijah, but the sirens pierced the night before Maddox could strike again. Red and blue lights lit the trees like Judgment Day. Police stormed the clearing, weapons drawn, shouting over the roar of fire and the cries of children beneath the earth. Officers tackled Maddox off Elijah just as the torch dropped from his hand. He didn't resist, he laughed, a sick, slow wheeze from cracked ribs and pride. "They paid for you too, Eli," he whispered, as cuffs snapped shut. "You were always for sale, just like them." And with that, he slumped forward, a devil in chains. Elijah staggered to his feet, blood painting his mouth, hands, soul. He turned back toward the cabin, now a funeral pyre of old ghosts and new beginnings. But from the ground, Ember burst out of the trapdoor, eyes frantic. "Elijah!" she screamed. "Where are you?" He caught her in his arms just before her knees gave out and held her tighter than life itself. The twins followed, blinking through tears, soot on their cheeks like war paint. Officers moved to help, but Elijah raised a hand. "They're mine," he said, voice hoarse but firm. "No one takes them, not now, not ever." A female cop stepped forward, gently nodding. "He's going away for good, you're safe now." But Elijah knew safety was a horizon, not a line. He held the girls close, Ember's heart pounding against his. Maddox's words still echoed, worming through the cracks of truth and love, but they didn't break him. Because love wasn't born from bloodlines, it was carved in sacrifice, and tonight, it had burned. Its way free. "They paid for you too, Eli. You were always for sale." Those words clung to the cold like frost on a grave. Elijah stood frozen in the snow, blood still dripping from his fists. Maddox's final whisper echoing in his skull. The officers dragged Maddox away, kicking and smirking, but the fire in Elijah's chest burned colder than the ashes behind him. He looked down at his trembling hands. Were they ever really his? Or did someone buy his soul before he even knew his name? The cabin behind him collapsed, beams snapping like old bones, sparks leaping toward heaven as if begging for mercy. Then, a sound broke the silence. Not a scream, not sirens. A woman's voice, fragile, cracking, disbelieving. "Ember?" Elijah turned. Through the line of trees, stumbling over roots and half-melted snow, came a woman with silver in her hair and urgency in her steps. Her coat flapped behind her like wings stolen from time. "My babies?" she cried, the wind stealing her breath but not her will. Ember gasped, her eyes widened. "Mama?" In a flash, she broke free from Elijah's side and ran. Her boots flew off. Her legs didn't feel the cold, only the gravity of a mother's arms calling her home. Isla dropped to her knees as Ember collided with her, tears soaking fabric, skin and soul. They didn't speak at first, they just held each other, like the earth had cracked and was begging them to keep it from falling apart. "Are you real?" Isla whispered, her lips trembling against her daughter's forehead. Ember nodded into her shoulder. "I never stopped looking." River and Rosie peeked from the trapdoor tunnel, blinking against the sun rising behind the smoke. "Come here, babies," Isla beckoned, her arms somehow wide enough to hold all the years she lost. Rosie flung herself forward, and River followed, clutching his sister's hand. The family, broken, scattered, hunted, was now one. And then, Isla's eyes found Elijah. For a second, her mouth dropped, as if recognizing something impossible. "Eli?" she gasped. "Is it really you?" He didn't speak, just took one slow step forward, then, another. Snow crunched under his boots like time unfolding. "Eli, my baby brother," she whispered, rising to her feet, hand covering her heart. Tears pooled in Elijah's eyes. "I came back, Isla," he said, voice rough with 1,000 silent nights. "I just didn't know it." She laughed through sobs and flung her arms around him. And in that embrace, the past shattered, replaced by a present that had finally come home. They stood there for minutes, wrapped in each other's pain and forgiveness, while the forest held its breath. The fire hissed as if giving up its fight. Snow melted around their feet, not from heat, but from healing. Time passed, days blurred into weeks. The authorities cleared the wreckage. Maddox was buried beneath a dozen charges. But that wasn't the ending. It was the beginning. 1 year later, the cabin had been rebuilt, not identical, but stronger, warmer. Its walls didn't hide secrets anymore. They echoed laughter. Inside, Rosie slept curled in a soft blanket, her favorite bunny clutched against her chest. River mumbled in dreams about planets and pancakes. Ember sat by the fire, a paintbrush in hand, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth as she painted a house surrounded by sunlight. A real home. Elijah watched her from the sofa, heart full but calm, a rare peace lining his features. He had shed the name Maddox gave him. Now he signed everything Eli Collins, and he meant it. Isla approached from the hallway, holding something in trembling hands. It was old, edges curled, faded, but powerful. She handed it to Elijah, a photograph. 2 babies, one swaddled in pink, the other in blue, lying side by side in a hospital crib. On the back, written in looping script, Isla Eli, Day 1. He blinked hard. "That's us?" She nodded. "Proof, Eli, that love doesn't die, it waits." He swallowed back tears. "I wasted so much time." "No," she whispered, touching his cheek. "You walked through fire, so we could find the sun." They looked out the window together. Snow still coated the ground, but the sky was blazing orange. Sunlight kissed the roof, the trees, the memories. Ember's painting now hung above the mantel, the cabin, the kids, Isla and Eli, arms linked, smiling. The caption below read in Ember's handwriting, "When snow turns to sunlight." Isla leaned in and whispered, "Welcome home, Eli Collins." And this time, he believed it.